Hey guys, Cameron for The Americans, Season 4, Episode 9, the day after, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. The Americans has just been on this amazing streak lately. They have been having amazing episode after amazing episode. As you guys know, from my last video, I said this is probably my favorite thing I'm watching on TV this right now. It's either this or Outlander. The two are very, very close, but definitely these two are like neck and neck in terms of like what I'm watching. But this episode, definitely really looking forward to, especially with that time jump last week. It really seemed like we were going in a much different direction, and this was another really great episode. I definitely really loved this episode. A lot of amazing scenes, especially that last scene I definitely do want to get into. And of course, the episode is called The Day After. Now, you guys will notice I'm not doing an in-depth review for this one because there's not as much to say about this episode. There was a lot to talk about, but again, this kind of was a setup episode. Now that we've had this episode of the Jennings getting to take primarily Phillip and Elizabeth. Paige clearly has not had a break, but Phillip and Elizabeth get to take a break from operations and from being KGB and things like that and all that kind of stuff. This was kind of our breather. This was kind of us setting up where we're headed for the second half of the season. Now we've had this time jump, which I thought was very well deserved. I really enjoyed. There was a lot of really good stuff they did with this episode. I really enjoyed where we're headed. We have only 4 episodes left after this, which is crazy, but this is really going quickly. And I think it's just because of how into the season I really am. But let's just get into this episode. There's a lot to talk about, and I love the way this episode starts off because from someone that hasn't watched The Americans, like say someone that just was changing the channel, this seemed like a really normal scene. We see Phillip in the car, and Paige is behind. Basically, Phillip gets Paige a car. Paige is behind the wheel, and he's giving her a driving lesson, and it's really nothing that out of the ordinary. It seems pretty simple, actually. Paige whines that the car is huge and tries to convince her dad that he should buy her a Camaro, and I feel like they did this for 2 reasons. One, it was kind of reminding me of, like old sitcoms where you'd see the dad and daughter, buy a car, like in Full House. If you remember the episode where DJ learned to drive, I know there was 90s, but still, if you remember the episode where DJ learned to drive, it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But I also think it was trying to show that, the Jennings try to be a regular family, and in many ways they are a regular family. Even though they're not a regular family at all, there are times when they can hide that, persona and really be this facade of a real family, which we know that they are a real family, but obviously they're not this, whole American, Nielsen family that we really see them as. But in this episode, they really did it that way. I thought that was really well done. And I love it. This scene didn't really focus on KGB at all. It was just Paige really just wanting a new car, buying a Camaro. It's actually a really fun scene. I really like the scenes between Phillip and Paige, and I thought there was some really good stuff there. And you really do see that because of them having this break, Phillip has really been able to spend more time with Paige, which is something he hasn't been able to do before. And I thought that was really well done here. Really good way to start the episode. But primarily, this episode focuses on Elizabeth and Yeon-hee, which I liked because we've seen stuff with Elizabeth and Yeon-hee. We've seen her be a friend to Elizabeth and everything, but we haven't really seen much go down in that because, again, we've been so focused on Martha, and then last week we were so focused on Paige, and this was kind of like, the closure with Martha. We get closure with Yeon-hee in this episode. We see Elizabeth is at her friend Yeon-hee's house. Yeon-hee is ranting about her kids and how much they have been acting up, and talk turns to how strict Yeon-hee and Elizabeth's moms were. They never would have been allowed to act the way their children do now. And it's a really interesting scene because it really does go with the whole idea of how kids were in the 80s. I mean, there were starting to be rebellion. The whole thing of children listening to their parents, it really wasn't as much of a thing anymore. The kids are starting to strike out more. I thought there was a really good scene. I definitely really enjoyed that. Really good stuff there. And I definitely really enjoyed the scenes between Elizabeth and Yeon-hee. And Ruthie Ann Miles, I mean, she really has been giving some really great stuff. I'm glad that she's really branching out because I've seen her do some really good performances, of course, on the Broadway stage. I like that she's getting a chance to do The American. She's been doing a great job, and I think that she was really good in this episode. So Paige managed to get herself and Phillip home in one piece. Luckily, they're still in the car. Then we get to, the real reality, because as much as they're trying to hide things and just be a normal family, we know, obviously, that they're not a normal family because, of course, Paige has to report every single little detail that she knows about Pastor Tim to Phillip and Elizabeth, and right away we get that here. And I love that we, up till now, it's been a pretty normal plot for Paige and Phillip, that it was simply just them buying a car, nothing too out of the ordinary. But then, of course, Paige says that there is a going away thing for Pastor Tim at the church before he goes to Ethiopia, and she thinks that the whole family should go with her because Pastor Tim likes to see them act more normal, and that might be the best thing to do because Pastor Tim wants to see them as a normal family. Of course, we know that Pastor Tim does not really like seeing them as KGB KGB spies, and that's something that I love about Pastor Tim, is that unlike Martha, Tim, Pastor Tim and his wife, they already know what Philip and Elizabeth do, that they are, in fact, these KGB spies and everything like that, because, of course, Paige ratted them out, and she thinks that the whole family should go with her, to Ethiopia, and that might be the best thing to do, because, one, Philip and Elizabeth are on a break right now, but unfortunately, they don't get to do that. We'll get into that a little bit later, though. We see Philip then heads to the gym with Stan to play a game of Squish, and we kind of catch up with Stan a little bit here. Now, we did get some stuff with Stan and Gad last week. Now, we don't really get any development with that. What we do get, however, is we see that Philip and Stan have grown a lot closer. I think ever since the fact that these two, they've been able to not have to deal with missions and things like that. I think, Stan's been able to put aside his differences. I think Stan's basically forgiven Philip at this point, and they're able to put aside their differences and still be friends. But of course, we know that this is kind of a toxic relationship. The fact that Stan knows all that information about Martha and Clark, still kind of concerns me, because I really do feel he's going to find out Philip's cover. I just don't think this season can end without Stan finding out. I mean, pretty much everyone knows at this point except for Stan. Stan is the one person that doesn't know. Of course, Henry as well, but I'm talking about central characters. Henry is sort of a central character. He's sort of not. Stan, however, is one of the, 4 central characters in the show, because I'd say the 4 central characters are Elizabeth, Philip, Stan, and Paige. Those really are 4 central characters. But Stan jokes that Philip is on fire lately. He asks if he's been taking vitamins. Philip says that he is just getting more sleep because he and Elizabeth got rid of some of their accounts. And Stan reveals that he and Tori broke up. He liked Tori a lot, but she just wasn't Sandra. And he just can't be with anyone if it's not Sandra. As we know, he really loves Sandra. That was someone that he really wanted to be with. And Stan says he has to leave. We know, of course, that him and Sandra were together and everything that they went through. And, of course, him and Sandra aren't together anymore. And you can tell he's having a hard time moving on. But I think it's also Nina. I think the fact that Nina has died, I think Stan really's had a hard time coping with that. And I mean, he really loved Nina, and there's that as well. So Stan says he has to leave early. He has a new boss since Gad retired, and he is a real hard ass. And I like that we didn't see this new boss. We're just hearing about him, because this wasn't our episode to focus on Stan right now. I think we're going to focus on him eventually, but right now we're kind of just setting up that Stan has this really angry boss that Stan clearly is kind of intimidated by, and I really did like seeing that. Thought there was some really good stuff there. But basically, apparently, since Gab retired, he has this really tough boss, and I thought they handled that really well. So Elizabeth gets home from the store. She says that there was a signal at William's site, and William didn't tell Gabriel. He's going behind the center's back to see them, and that's something that they can't be doing, because obviously, Gabriel said straight out no new operations, but William is doing this regardless because of the fact that he's very concerned, and I don't blame William. I mean, when finding out why William is seeking them out, I don't blame him for talking to them, obviously. So Philip thinks that they should go, see what he wants. Philip heads to the park to see William. And William, because, Philip really doesn't know if he should do this. He's really thinking, look, we're supposed to be on break right now. Gabriel told us to stay out of this, and Philip thinks that they might do this. But then he realizes that, maybe he has something to talk about. Why don't we just go see him? William seems upset, though, because he hasn't seen or talked to Philip in a while. And it's a really good scene. You really do see that William genuinely cares. Philip says they've been on a break for months, and William says it, and I like that we found that it's been months that they've been on this break. We know it's 7 months, obviously. It was a 7-month time jump. So William says that he's sorry to interrupt their vacation, but they just got something new in a modified form of the Lassa virus, and it's a level 4 and makes you bleed through your skin, which is crazy. I don't know if this is an actual thing, but holy shit, if that's an actual thing, and there actually is a Lassa virus out there, I don't know, guys. I mean, that's pretty crazy that there could actually be a Lassa virus out there, but William says the worst thing he's ever saw. He doesn't want to handle it, and he just can't handle it alone. He is also thinking about not telling the center about it because he doesn't want to get them paranoid. He doesn't want them to get involved. Of course, the last time the whole Glanders operation obviously didn't really work out. This might not work out either. So William whines he doesn't trust the Russians with it, and he feels that it's best if they just do this on their own without Gabriel knowing, which is very, very risky because of the fact that they are going behind Gabriel's back, even though Gabriel never really gave them that approval to get back in, and throughout the episode they never had that conversation with Gabriel. They are doing a mission behind Gabriel's back, which is very interesting. The way that William was almost like a second handler to them here, I thought was very interesting. But it's a really great scene because Philip knows after this episode there is no more vacation. It's over. Now they need to basically continue. They need to do this thing with William. They don't want to do it, but they need to. They need to continue what they're doing, even though they love being on this vacation, and They loved being, of course, a normal family. They can never be a normal family because they're not a normal family. They'll never be that normal family that, they want to be, and it's really sad to see. But I thought that was a very effective scene. I thought it was a really good way to show that they just, you can't, like I said, they can't go back to that normal family dynamic that they want just because they'll never be that way. So I thought there was some really good stuff there. I really enjoyed that scene with William. It's a sad scene because you know that there really is no way that they can't do this. We can tell straight out that Philip does want them to handle this, but in many ways they're also doing the wrong thing. They're going against Gabriel, and you don't really know how this is going to play out, especially because, as we know, Gabriel's already threatened them with retiring, and he told them straight out that he doesn't want them to do this anymore because he feels they're juggling too much already. So then we get this great scene. Later that night, Elizabeth, Stan, Philip, and the kids sit down to watch a special program on TV called The Day After, and that is what this episode is named after. And I've heard about The Day After. I've heard it's a really crazy movie. I've heard it's the most watched television film of all time, and for good reason. Now, I did the right thing, I think, with this, because I didn't just watch the show. I did watch clips of The Day After while I was watching this episode, which, let me tell you, was very hard to do, mainly because I didn't want to watch the whole movie, and also because the movie is a very hard watch. I mean, you really have to be in a certain state of mind when you're watching that movie. You need to know that movie was made in the 80s, and that all of that happens in that movie, maybe it's not possible now, but back then it was very, very possible that it could have happened, and that's one of the reasons why I think the movie was as effective as it is. And could it still happen today? I mean, probably not in the same way it does in the movie, but I think it really does still portray that, really hyper realistic, horrifically realistic. That's why the movie was so great, because it's horrifically realistic. And I love the way the scene was done, because at first it's just us seeing the reactions, but then we ourselves get to see like all the bombings and things like that. We get to see the nuclear explosions, and it's kind of like we're watching this ourselves. And after the show is, and I love that they did let us watch it, because in many ways the war that's going on The Day After is very much like the Cold War that's going on within the show, because of course there's no actual attacks going on, but there's always that fear that Russia is going to bomb them, and there's always that fear in them. And basically, after the show is over, Philip tells Elizabeth that he thinks that William might be right. They should not tell the center about the Lassa virus. Now, like I said, I love the way the scene was done. It doesn't just go to the Jennings family. It goes to Stan. It goes to Oleg and Tatiana. It goes to really everyone, and just really shows their reactions. I thought there was some really great stuff there. I really love what they did with this scene, and it really just shows how the Americans can just use one event that happened in history and really just connect it to what's going on, because this really does connect very much to what's going on. Obviously, there are no bombs being dropped, but in many ways, there's a bomb, I think, kind of being dropped in the family. That dynamic that they had of being a normal family is now shattered, and the way that is shattered is the same way that their things are shattered for them. And The Day After also, I think, really goes with the day after their vacation. Like, the day after they get this news, now the day after they are back to where they wanted to be. They don't want to be here at all. They don't want to really continue this mission, and especially Philip. I mean, we've known since season 2 that Philip does not want to be a KGB agent. He's wanted to opt out, but he's only stayed there because he's basically been forced to, because they've given him other options that obviously he's not okay with. And after the show is over, Philip basically decides that William might be right, that they should not tell the center about the Lassa virus. Elizabeth disagrees. She reminds Philip that it liquefies your organs, and that the U.S. is probably going to use it on the Russians, and need to get a sample of it to the center so they can work on developing the antidote, because obviously it's a very complex situation. We know what happened with the glanders, and we know that Elizabeth almost died from the glanders, so this is even more dangerous, knowing that this is out there. It liquefies your organs. I mean, they really don't know. They really have to be cautious with the way they handle this, especially because the U.S. might use it, and they don't really realize how dangerous it really is. And I like that Phil wants to remain low-key, while Elizabeth doesn't. And let me just say something else about the day after scene. If you notice, Philip got really emotional. Elizabeth, however, while I think intrigued and affected, didn't actually cry. Like, she didn't tear up in that scene. It really just shows how different Philip and Elizabeth channel emotion. I mean, Philip was straight up crying. Elizabeth wasn't. Paige was by far the most startled. You could tell that she was definitely the most startled, which was really great. I really did love seeing Paige that startled, because I think Paige just knows that the world could be like that. That could be possible. And especially with her knowing what her parents do, knowing that that is what they're capable of, it really is startling, especially for a kid like that. No kid should ever have to go through that. And I love that we're seeing more of that traumatic side of Paige that we've been seeing all season. It's really great to see. So Yun, he and her husband Don are leaving town on a romantic getaway for a weekend. They're renting a cabin in the woods, which never turns out well, obviously. This isn't a horror movie, but we know cabin in the woods usually leads to disaster, and Elizabeth has been enlisted to babysit their 3 small kids at their house while they're out of town. And after the kids fall asleep, Elizabeth snoops around Yun Hee's house, but she doesn't find out what she's looking for, and basically she's trying to investigate Don, because Dawn is someone that she needs to target. I guess she's trying to find out more about him. She doesn't really suspect him. And she finds some pornos from Dawn, of all things, which was very interesting. And just the way the scene was done, with her finding everything, going through his pornos, things like that, it was a very effective scene. I really love that, and I thought there was some really great stuff there. So meanwhile, Oleg and Tatiana have sex for the first time, and it's a really good scene, because we see it's not just a random sex scene. Like, the show used to be very built on sex scenes, and if you remember season 1, there was a sex scene almost every episode, and it's not really like that anymore. Like, it's very rare the show actually has a straight up sex scene, and they did here. Afterwards, Tatiana jokes about how quiet she is during sex and how not quiet Oleg is. I mean, Oleg is practically screaming the entire time, and basically, we find out that Tatiana used to sneak around. She lived with several family members. They wind up talking, and Oleg tells Tatiana a story about his father. And I thought this was a really good way to show the state that Oleg and Tatiana are in now, because obviously, Tatiana was with Arcady, and it seemed like they were going to have something, but now it seems like she's with Oleg. These two are now together. Clearly, he's gotten over Nina's death. He's moved on to Tatiana, and I think he did a very good job at just being so low-key about it. That is how you do a time jump. You don't make a spectacle out of it. You just show us things that have happened, and that was perfect that they did that. They wind up talking, and Oleg tells Tatiana a story about his father. Apparently, Russia nearly launched nuclear missiles at the U.S. because they thought U.S. had fired 5 nuclear missiles at them, and it turns out the software was wrong, that the missiles was actually just the sun reflecting off the clouds, and that is why the day after, I think, affected Oleg the way it did, because he really thought what could have happened if there was, in fact, that Russia did launch nuclear missiles at the U.S. I think he's really thinking about that. I think it was very interesting, and really great stuff with Oleg and Tatiana. I really do enjoy it. I like the dynamic that they have. Again, it was unexpected, but I like that. Again, the show is never predictable, and that's something I will always stress, is that I will never feel like I know everything that's going to happen in the show. I never feel that way. I always feel like it's unpredictable, and this is a perfect example of that. So then we get this great scene with Phillip and Paige. They're cleaning the kitchen, and Paige is really affected by the Day After movie that she watched. You know, she's asking if that could really happen, and Phillip reassures Paige that he and her mother try to work hard and stop a nuclear war like that from happening. And what Paige says to them, I like what she says. You know, the line where she says, "Isn't really doing anything," she's not wrong. I mean, Phillip and Elizabeth, yes, they've been doing this, but have they really changed anything? Have they really affected the Cold War? No, they haven't really changed much of anything, really. In fact, the Cold War is still going on within them. There's not really much happening. You know, there's still Russians being targeted. There's still that threat of them dropping a bomb, and that's kind of what the Day After was about. It was mainly made to bring awareness of, you know, what could really happen if this situation could occur, and really what could happen there. And I like seeing this conversation with Phillip and Paige. It really just show how effective this movie really was. And I like they didn't just use the movie as the driving story. It really feels like the movie is just another part of this bigger story of them trying to keep this family unit, and also them trying to stay sane and trying not to, you know, fracture the family, and, you know, have that bomb go off in their family, which I definitely think is coming, but definitely really good stuff. I really enjoyed that, and especially the dynamic between Phillip and Paige is just really different now, because like I said, they're trying to act like a normal family when they're clearly not at all, and Paige wants them to act normal, but I think she knows deep down they're not. And basically, Phillip reassures Paige that he and her mother work hard, and it's just a really great scene, really great stuff there, and I like the way that just these little scenes here and there were they affected by the Day After. It didn't drive the whole story forward like last week's event did with David Copperfield, but it did, in fact, I think, have some really good, you know, provide some really good insight and metaphors into what the episode was really trying to get at, in the sense that, yes, obviously, the show's not trying to say, oh, the day after, you know, there's gonna be a bomb that's gonna drop off. Not that kind of bomb. I think it's more of a figurative bomb. It's more of the bomb being dropped in their family. It's more the bomb being dropped in their lives. Their little staycation is now over, and they need to move on and continue what they don't want to do. So Phil meets up with William. He tells him that he and Elizabeth discussed it, and they think that William should tell the center about the Lassa virus. And William doesn't seem thrilled about it, because he's going against Gabriel, and he really doesn't know how Gabriel's going to react to this. We know, of course, what happened with Gabriel and the Glanders. He doesn't want the same thing to happen here, and you totally understand that. And basically, Elizabeth and then he's not really, like I said, thrilled about it. And then we get some incredible scenes with Elizabeth here. I mean, this was extremely well done. Every scene Elizabeth after this is completely in her perspective. We're seeing everything through her eyes. She calls Yun Hee's house from a payphone. Her husband Don answers the phone. Elizabeth tells Don that she went out with a guy and got in a fight with him and he left her at the restaurant. Don tells Elizabeth not to move, says he is coming to rescue her, and clearly she's just trying to create diversion. She wants to get information out of him. She wants to find out what's going on there. Phil then has a church event with Paige to see off Pastor Tim. Paige runs off to see pregnant Alice, and Tim takes Philip aside. He says that he's worried about Paige. She seems really sad lately. And apparently Paige's act is not convincing Pastor Tim. He sees right through her. He knows deep down that she's not actually happy, and he can tell that definitely she's not feeling happy with this, because she's not. She genuinely does care about Pastor Tim. And that's the thing with Paige that Phillip and Elizabeth is not the same with. Obviously, Phillip and Elizabeth, we know, I don't think that's not that they don't care about Pastor Tim, but they're so used to this, and Paige just isn't. This isn't really what she's meant to do. She's not used to handling this kind of situation, and it's just really different for her. It's not something that she's used to doing, and basically, because of that, Pastor Tim sees this really. He can see right through her. He knows that she's not actually happy. He knows that she's really covering something up, and he really just wants to know what it is. But of course, they can't tell him, and that's really the sad part about it. And it looks like next week, Pastor Tim's gonna go missing. I don't know how, but apparently he goes missing. Elizabeth convinces Dawn to come upstairs to her apartment with her, help her move a piece of furniture, and obviously she's trying to distract him. Afterwards, she flirts with him, pours him a glass of wine, and drops a pill inside of it. They start talking about Elizabeth's crappy date record and discuss how he and Yun Hee fell in love. Then Elizabeth makes her move, kisses Dawn, he jumps up, says he has to go, then he passes out and falls on the floor, and once Dawn is passed out, Elizabeth puts him in his bed, strips off all his clothes, then she gets undressed, climbs into bed with him, and it's this really powerful scene where you can tell Elizabeth knows what she's doing is wrong, but she's doing what she needs to do. And it's a great scene here, and I love the montage going on within this scene. I don't remember what the song was called, but it was really well done. Philip apparently took what Pastor Tim said to heart and decided to spend some quality time with Paige, and he tells her that she can do her homework later, surprised her with another driving test, this time in his beloved Camaro, and things seem to be going well. She's actually not hitting any cars, she's actually doing well on the road, and again, it's them being that father-daughter dynamic that they really want to be. I think Paige always wanted them to be like this, but they're not really like this, and that's really the sad part about it, is that they're not really this way. They want to be this way, but they're not this way, and Don then wakes up naked and confused. He freaks out when he sees Elizabeth in bed with him. He gets up, gets dressed, says that he is sorry. He runs out of the room. Elizabeth lies in bed by herself. It looks like she might actually feel bad. I love that she's actually feeling upset about this. She knows she did wrong. She knows what she did really has affected Yun Hee and Don's marriage. And Elizabeth heads home. Philip follows her upstairs. She's nearly in tears, tells Philip that she's going to miss her friend Yun Hee because she knows that Yun Hee will never speak to her again. And that is how this episode ends. And overall, guys, amazing stuff. I absolutely love this episode. I thought this was another really great episode. I don't think it was on the same level as the two last week, but really was a different kind of episode. This is more of us seeing that no matter what Phil and Elizabeth do, they're not going to be able to get pulled out of this mission. It's just not going to work that way. The reason last week's episode felt like a series finale is because it seemed like that really was finally the chance for Elizabeth and Philip to pull out of this, but that's just not going to happen. We know for a fact that's not going to happen. They need to stay involved, and what's going on with William's a very complex situation, because obviously, like I said, William is not telling Gabriel about this, and I don't really know how Gabriel's going to react, what's going to happen with that. That's going to be very interesting, how Gabriel's going to react to that, if he's even going to want to, them to continue this, and how's Gabriel going to react to them being back, because obviously he told them no new missions until they feel right, so we'll see what happens with that. Are they really feeling okay? I don't feel like they do feel right. I feel like really they have a lot of doubts about moving forward, but they feel the best thing to do is to just move forward, because they need to obviously help people, but they don't really want to. They kind of just want to be that family unit that they've always wanted to be, and they can't really be that way, and it's just really sad to think about. Definitely, I felt very bad for them in this episode. As far as Stan goes, we didn't find a lot about Stan's life in this episode, but we do know that he obviously, like I said, we found a lot about Stan's life in this episode. We didn't really get to see his life, but we've heard about it, and we heard about, of course, how his boss is a real hard-ass and what happened with Tori, and I really do feel that Stan's starting to get suspicious of Philip. Just the way this is going, I feel like that's where we're going to go. It just seems like that's the direction we're headed. I think that's definitely going to be very interesting. And I like both Elizabeth and Philip have both experienced emotional, traumatic events with their, what do you call it? Now I can't think of what they're called. Not recruiters, but, agents, I think. Yeah, agents, obviously. Agents, the ones that they're trying to get information out of. Now, obviously, Elizabeth is not as traumatic as Phil, but it really does put a detriment into Yun Hee and Dawn's relationship. Dawn was never supposed to wake up. That was not the plan. You know, she was supposed to sedate him so she could find out more about him. And I never really knew why she was trying to get information on Dawn. That's my only complaint in this episode. Why exactly was she trying to get information on Dawn? That seemed a bit underwritten to me. Maybe there just wasn't something I got there, but to me that just felt like we were kind of missing something from that. I don't know if I just didn't hear it, but I just feel like something was kind of missing there. I really love what they did with the day after this episode. I think they used that as a really good base for, like I said, there's going to be an atomic bomb, I think, dropped in the family, and kind of that's really what's going on. They can't be that family unit that they want to be, unfortunately, which is very sad. I like this dynamic between Oleg and Tatiana. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to go. And we know, of course, that Gad told Stan to seek out Oleg and to possibly partner up with him. Is it actually going to happen? Is Stan just going to decide to work with Oleg? I don't really know. That's going to be very interesting to see if he does end up working, working with him. Pastor Tim clearly is seeing through Paige. It seems like this is not going to go on for that much longer. He definitely is going to realize that there's definitely something going on with Paige and that she definitely is faking her happiness, which we know she pretty much is, and she really just wants to be, that normal father-daughter bond that Philip and her have, like them in the car, just basically just being a regular father-daughter with him teaching her how to drive and her being on the road and loving it. That's really what she wants to be. She wants to be a normal teenager, and that's what I love about this, is that Paige, through these first few seasons, seemed like she actually was interested, but now that she's actually in, she's realizing, I think, she really wants to be a regular teenager, and she really doesn't want to be involved in this, and no, she hasn't really gotten to make a choice, but I don't know what's going to happen with that. I think it's going to be very interesting what's going to happen there, if she's actually going to, because I don't really think that Paige has ever really agreed to this. I think they kind of just pulled her in. I mean, Elizabeth told her straight out that we're forcing you to do this. You're going to tell us everything that happens every week. I think that's going to be very interesting, the way that is going. But overall, guys, really great episode. Again, another really solid one. They're really killing the season. I'm absolutely loving this season. You guys know, like I said, I think it's the strongest season of the Americans. Let me know if you guys saw this episode with your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys at the next one, which will be for either Empire or The Path. I don't know which one, but I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.